You think they replaced you, but they didn't. They replaced the version of themselves they were becoming around you because you touched a part of them they've spent their whole life protecting. And when someone breaks the pattern they've been surviving with for years, they don't settle into it. They run from it. Fast, hard, without explanation. Not because you were wrong for them, but because you were real to them. Too real. And that kind of real doesn't get forgotten. Not by people who spent years trying not to feel anything at all. So here's the truth behind why they replaced you, but can't erase you. It starts with the part they never wanted anyone to see. You didn't just get close to them, you got into the quiet places, into the guarded places, into the parts they only access when they're alone. They weren't ready for that, not even a little. Avoidants don't crumble when you walk away. They crumble when they start to care, because caring creates expectation, pressure, exposure, risk, and they've spent their entire life building systems to avoid that feeling. But you slipped past all their defenses without even trying. You weren't forcing intimacy. You weren't demanding closeness. You weren't pushing for more. You were simply present, consistent, emotionally safe. And that was the danger, because emotional safety is the one thing that terrifies someone who never felt it growing up. They don't trust it. They don't believe it lasts. They don't understand why someone like you would want someone like them for real. So instead of allowing themselves to be held, they run, not because they don't feel, but because they feel too much and don't know what to do with it. This is the part you never saw, the part behind the push-pull, the cold retreats, the silent switches. Every time they got close to you, their nervous system read it as danger. Every tender moment felt like a trap door. Every soft look felt like a step too far. So when the emotions got too loud, they chose the only thing that ever kept them safe: distance. And distance is easier with someone new than with someone who already saw the real them. People think avoidants move on quickly, that they replace easily, that they don't feel anything. But the truth is, they don't choose new people for intimacy. They choose them for quiet, for emotional silence, for the absence of what they felt with you. You became the emotional noise, the intensity, the realness, the mirror. So they entered something new to escape the version of themselves. You woke up not because they liked someone more, but because someone else made them feel less vulnerable, less responsible, less exposed. Avoidants don't replace you to forget you. They replace you to stop feeling like themselves in ways that scare them. But here's the twist. Running doesn't erase you. It preserves you. You become the unfinished chapter they don't talk about, the unresolved story, the emotional landmark they circle back to again and again in secret. The new person isn't chosen from desire. They're chosen from fear. Fear of repeating the closeness they had with you. Fear of showing the same softness. Fear of feeling the same intensity. The new person feels safer, not because of who they are, but because of who they don't require them to be. They don't ask for depth. They don't trigger attachment wounds. They don't mirror their vulnerability. They don't activate anything. They offer emotional silence. And silence is the closest thing to safety an avoidant has ever known. But silence comes with a cost, because when the connection is quiet, the memory of you gets louder, not all at once, but in waves, in moments, in comparisons they never admit out loud. Avoidants don't compare people. They compare feelings. They compare how seen they felt, how understood they felt, how safe how exposed, how alive. The new person gets the mask, the distance, the self-contained version. You got the real one, the one that almost came forward, the one that almost tried, the one that wanted more and froze. And that's why forgetfulness is impossible. You were a pattern interruption, a disruption, a break in the emotional script they've performed for years. Avoidants have a rhythm, a predictable emotional arc, a set of rules they follow without knowing. Stay close enough to not be lonely. Stay far enough to not be hurt. You broke that rhythm. You moved differently. You connected differently. You reached differently. You made them feel something uncomfortable and unfamiliar. Emotional safety. And emotional safety is the exact thing their body doesn't know how to hold. So when the feelings deepened, confusion deepened with it. Shame rose. Fear rose. Old wounds woke up. Old lessons whispered, "Don't trust this. Don't let this in. Don't stay." So they did what their nervous system has always done. They detached. Quickly, sharply, without closure. Because closure requires honesty, and honesty requires vulnerability. And vulnerability is the one thing they learned early gets punished, not by you, but by life, by childhood, by experience, by memory. And here's the part you never give yourself credit for. You were not forgettable. You were formative. You were the emotional moment. That changed their entire understanding of connection. They don't forget the person who challenged their fear. They don't forget the person who made them feel wanted without begging. They don't forget the person who made closeness seem possible, even if they couldn't accept it. Avoidants don't forget. They store. Quietly. Permanently. They store the softness you gave, the steadiness, the gentleness, the presence, the emotional clarity. They store the fact that you were different, not because you tried harder, but because you connected deeper. And they carry that into every new relationship, every attempt at moving on, every moment they feel lonely next to someone they don't actually feel close to. This is the truth. They didn't leave because the connection lacked meaning. They left because the meaning overwhelmed them. They didn't replace you because something was wrong with you. They replaced you because something was waking up in them, something they weren't ready to confront. And they don't forget the person who woke that up, ever. They acted like walking away was easy, like closing the door didn't hurt, like you were just another chapter they could skim through and forget. But avoidance is never clean. It's never simple. It's never as emotionless as they pretend. Avoidants leave quietly, but they feel loudly, in the places you can't see, in the moments they never talk about. Because the truth is, leaving you wasn't a choice. It was a reflex, a survival instinct that activated the moment they realized you mattered. Nobody tells you this. The stronger the bond, the stronger the escape. That's why the breakup felt abrupt, sudden, cold, almost inhuman. It wasn't cruelty. It was fear, wearing the mask of indifference. And fear always moves fast. Avoidants don't walk away because they don't care. They walk away because caring feels dangerous. Caring pulls them into a depth they don't know how to swim in. Caring demands presence, consistency, softness, repair, accountability, and they were never taught how to exist in that space. So instead of trying, they retreat, they collapse inward, they shut down, they go numb. People mistake numbness for lack of emotion, but numbness is what people feel when emotion is too big to hold. You weren't too much. Your presence was. Your kindness was. Your energy was. Your stability was. not because it was wrong, but because it was unfamiliar. Avoidants don't fear love. They fear what love requires. They fear what love brings up. They fear the weight of feeling safe in someone else's presence. And your presence felt like safety. That's why they ran. But here's the part you never saw. They didn't feel relief after leaving. They felt confusion. They felt emptiness. They felt the quiet you used to fill. They didn't move on. They moved away. And distance doesn't heal an avoidant. It just gives them room to miss you. Not instantly, but eventually. Always eventually. It starts with something small. A song, a routine, a place you brought them to, a sentence you used to say, something soft, something personal. And suddenly, their chest tightens in a way they can't explain. They tell themselves it's nothing, just a memory, just a moment, just a flash. But the body keeps track of what mattered, long before the mind admits it. Avoidants don't forget, because they detach. They detach, because they remember. Too much, too intensely, too quickly. So instead of carrying the weight, they drop everything. They drop you. They drop vulnerability. They drop connection. But dropping something doesn't destroy it. It just hides it until the quiet moments, when everything comes back in a single breath. Avoidants don't forget the person they felt safe with. They remember them in the spaces where safety is missing, and the new connection they ran to. It always lacks the one thing you gave without trying. Emotional clarity. That's what haunts them. You weren't confusing. You were grounding. You were emotionally fluent in ways they couldn't imitate. With you, they didn't have to pretend. They didn't have to perform. They didn't have to manage you. You saw them without asking them to be anything more. That's the kind of intimacy they don't know how to hold, but don't know how to forget. Because you weren't a role they had to play. You were a mirror they didn't feel worthy of standing in front of. Avoidants don't leave when they're bored. They leave when they're seen. And you saw them too clearly, too deeply, too gently. That's what left the imprint. Every avoidant has a moment after they distance, a quiet collapse. They keep to themselves. They replay memories and wonder why they felt overwhelmed. They scroll your messages long after the breakup, trying to decode what scared them. They stalk your profile, not because they want to come back, but because they want to understand why they couldn't stay. Avoidants don't revisit the people they feel nothing for. They revisit the ones who woke feelings they weren't prepared to face. That's you. You became the internal conflict they don't admit. The person their avoidance couldn't fully outrun. Because you represented something their body wanted, even when their mind rejected it. A connection without chaos, a presence without threat, a love without demands. That's the exact formula that overwhelms someone who learned love through instability. You were stable, they were conditioned to flinch at stability. And deep down, they know they didn't break things because the relationship was wrong. They broke things because the relationship was right in a way they weren't ready for. Here's what happens next in their emotional cycle. After the escape, after the relief, after the rush of distance, comes the crash. The moment the new person doesn't feel like home. The moment the excitement fades. The moment the mask feels heavy. The moment the silence feels isolating. Avoidants don't bond immediately. They bond slowly, retrospectively, through memory, not presence. So the connection with you often becomes clearer to them after you're gone, not because absence improves it, but because distance finally lets them feel what closeness meant. They never feel the truth. In the moment, they feel it. In the aftermath, they didn't forget you. They froze you. They put the memories in a place. They told themselves they'd never look at again. But life has a way of nudging that drawer open when they feel lonely, when they feel misunderstood, when the new connection hits a shallow wall, when they try to emotionally open and realize they can't. Not with this person, not the way they almost did with you. And that almost becomes a ghost. They can't shake. Avoidants don't forget the person. They could have been with you. That's the part that follows them. Not your face, not your texts, not your voice, but the version of themselves they glimpsed and then lost. And here's the quiet truth that stings them later. They replaced you with someone easier, but they didn't find someone deeper. And while depth scares them, it also fills them in a way shallow connections cannot. So they feel something they never planned for. Regret. Not the loud kind. Not the kind they confess. Not the kind they act on. But the quiet kind. The lingering kind. The what if kind. The I wasn't ready kind. Avoidants don't regret losing people. They regret losing potential. They regret losing safety. They regret losing peace. And that regret always leads them back to the same realization. They didn't replace you. They replaced the chance to grow with you. You weren't forgettable. You were formative. You weren't a filler chapter. You were the plot twist they weren't prepared for. You weren't the one who loved too hard. You were the one who loved in a language their heart understood, but their body feared. That's not something a new person replaces. That's something their memory revisits over and over in quiet rooms and late nights and moments of shame and moments of clarity and moments of longing they will never admit. And that is why you still live in them, even while they pretend they've moved on. You think they forgot you because they don't reach out. But silence isn't absence. For an avoidant, silence is their coping mechanism, their shield, their emotional hiding place. They stay quiet, not because you don't matter, but because you matter in a way that terrifies them. Avoidants fear two things: being abandoned and being needed. You triggered both at the same time, and that combination creates a kind of emotional paralysis they can't explain and don't know how to fix. They don't reach out because reaching out means facing what they ran from, facing you, facing themselves, facing the feelings they buried the moment they left. Avoidants don't just suppress, they self-erase. They shut down parts of themselves they don't have the capacity to manage. And the version of themselves they were with you, that's the version they're terrified to access again. Because that version felt too much, wanted too much, hoped too much. And hope has always been dangerous for them. Here's the truth no one told you. The avoidant doesn't forget you. They avoid you because they can't forget you. They avoid you because the memory is too alive, too sharp, too real. Their mind doesn't want to reopen what their heart never finished. So they stay silent because silence feels safer than honesty, safer than vulnerability, safer than admitting that losing you hurt far more than they expected. They think avoiding you keeps the emotions contained, but you live in the places they can't contain. Avoidants try to heal by shrinking their world, by reducing emotional stimuli, by limiting the amount of connection they feel. It's not malicious, it's protective. They don't trust themselves with deep feelings. They don't trust others to hold their depth. They don't trust love to stay. So they default to the only emotional position that ever felt manageable: distance. But distance doesn't erase emotional truth. It magnifies it, just on a delay. Avoidants don't miss you quickly. They miss you slowly, gradually, in waves, through comparison, through nostalgia, through discomfort, through emptiness. They miss you in the moments where the new person doesn't understand them, doesn't read them, doesn't attune to them. Avoidants don't crave intensity. They crave attunement, that quiet emotional knowing they never admit they need. But attunement requires openness, closeness, softness, all the things they're terrified to give, all the things they almost gave you. You were not forgotten. You became the emotional blueprint, their body references, without permission, not because of longing, but because of truth. You showed them what emotional resonance feels like, what closeness without chaos feels like, what connection without pressure feels like. They didn't know that kind of experience existed, so they don't know how to replace it. They try. They always try. But replacements don't recreate depth. They recreate distractions until the distraction breaks and the truth resurfaces. The avoidance memory of you doesn't come back as romance. It comes back as clarity. Clarity about what they felt. Clarity about what they ran from. Clarity about what they lost. Avoidants don't feel clarity in the relationship. They feel it in the aftermath, when everything is calm, when feelings settle, when numbness wears off, when the new connection feels shallow, when the old connection feels alive again. Clarity hits them in the moments they least expect. A random thought, a sudden ache, a memory they didn't summon, a question they can't answer. That's when the truth breaks through. They didn't run because you were wrong. They ran because you were right. Avoidants live in a constant contradiction. They want connection, but fear what connection demands. They want closeness, but fear losing themselves in it. They want love, but fear depending on it. You brought them closer to what they wanted, and that proximity triggered every defense they had. You were the emotional invitation they weren't prepared to accept. And now, you're the emotional memory they can't escape. Here's the part no one sees. After an avoidant leaves, they go into emotional withdrawal, a shutdown, not because of you, but because their system can't handle the intensity of what they felt. They need space to stabilize, to numb out, to reset their internal equilibrium. The problem? When the emotional system resets, the truth rises. Emotional clarity arrives in the silence they created, and that's when they realize the depth they had with you doesn't exist everywhere. It doesn't even exist often. It's rare. It's specific. It's yours. Avoidants don't regret losing love. They regret losing safety, disguised as love. And safety is the one thing they spend their entire life seeking, but don't know how to receive. You gave them something they weren't ready to hold, something they didn't recognize until it was gone, something the new connection cannot recreate, no matter how hard they try to convince themselves otherwise. Avoidants tell themselves stories to survive the loss. Stories like, I needed space. It wasn't right. It was too much. I'm better alone. They'll move on. I'll move on too. But those stories buckled under the truth they refused to face. Your connection was the first time they felt emotionally seen and emotionally overwhelmed at the exact same time. That combination left a mark, a deep one, a quiet one, the kind of mark the mind forgets, but the body remembers. Avoidants don't mourn people, they mourn possibilities. The possibility of what could have happened if they didn't run, the possibility of what might have grown if they stayed present, the the possibility of who they could have become with you. They replay the almost, the edges of the relationship, the moments they shut down, the moments they hesitated, the moments they misread you. Avoidance replay regret through subtle memory, not dramatic emotion, a slow burn, a quiet ache, a recognition they can't voice out loud. And here's the deepest truth you never realized. You didn't just represent love, you represented healing. And healing is terrifying to someone who learned to survive without it. You represented the life they want to live, but don't know how to step into, the version of themselves they wish they could be, but can't sustain, without fear swallowing them whole. So they replaced the relationship to escape the transformation, but they couldn't replace the impact. You're the emotional doorway they closed too soon, and the one they keep looking back at. Avoidants don't forget. They delay. They push feelings into the corners of their mind and hope time dissolves them. But time doesn't dissolve what was real. It intensifies it. It crystallizes it. It makes it sharper. You become the benchmark they measure future connections against, not in comparison, but in sensation. How did I feel with them? Why did I feel more alive? Why did I feel safer? Why did I open up? Why did I shut down? Those questions haunt them quietly, because the answer is always the same. You touched a part of them they didn't think anyone would ever reach. And that kind of touch doesn't fade, it echoes. There comes a moment in every avoidance story where the running stops working, not because they stopped fearing intimacy, but because distance no longer gives them the numbness they relied on. They look around, and the silence they once found comforting feels heavy now, hollow, airless. This is the moment where the memory of you shifts from background noise to a quiet truth they can't push away anymore. Because avoidance isn't freedom, it's emotional starvation. And eventually, starvation turns into craving, a craving for the exact connection they told themselves they didn't need, a craving for the safety they once felt with you, a craving for the softness they believed they could live without. But the heart has a long memory, much longer than their defenses. Avoidance always reached this stage, not always publicly, not always outwardly, but internally. They arrive at the moment where running stops feeling like relief and starts feeling like regret, where the logic that once justified leaving no longer makes sense, where the stories they told themselves start to crumble under the truth their body never stopped holding. It doesn't happen suddenly. It happens slowly, quietly, in the moments when life is still, when the distractions fade, when the new person feels unfamiliar, when something small reminds them of what they once had and didn't know how to keep. Avoidants don't break down loudly. They break down in a whisper. It hits them in the way they can't talk to the new person, the way they talk to you, not because they don't want to, but because the emotional door doesn't open the same way. It hits them in the way they try to joke, the way they did with you, and it falls flat. It hits them when they laugh and realize the laughter feels empty. It hits them when they get quiet and notice nobody notices. Because you noticed. Always. You read the pauses. You felt the shifts. You attuned to the subtle signs. They didn't even know they were giving off. Avoidants don't forget. The person who understood them without needing explanations. They feel the absence of that understanding long before they're willing to say it out loud. They thought distance would help them reset, help them breathe, help them reclaim their sense of control. And for a while, it did, or it seemed to. But once the nervous system calms, once the panic fades, once the emotional noise settles into quiet, truth shines through. And the truth is this: you weren't the problem. You were the connection they weren't prepared to maintain. You were the softness their body didn't know how to rest in. You were the peace they confused for pressure, because peace was unfamiliar. Avoidants avoid, not because they don't care, but because what they feel is too overwhelming to manage. And the memory of you came wrapped in too much meaning for them to carry. But meaning stays, even when people leave, especially when people leave. You're not a ghost that haunts them. You're a truth that follows them. Every avoidant faces that truth in stages. First, they minimize. Then, they numb. Then, they distract. Then, they compare. Then, they feel. And finally, they understand. Understand what they lost. Understand why they ran. Understand what they weren't ready for. And when they finally understand, it hits them in a way they can't outrun. This is the part they never tell anyone. The part where they wonder if you would still be there, if they reached out. The part where they hover over your name and don't message. The part where they draft long texts and delete them. The part where they convince themselves you're better off without them, because it wipes away the responsibility to try again. Avoidants don't fear losing you. They fear hurting you, failing you, disappointing you. And deep down, they know they will, if they come back, before they evolve. That's why they stay away. Not because of indifference, but because of shame. Because the truth is, they miss the connection, but feel unworthy of the person. Avoidants don't come back. When they miss you, they come back. When they believe they won't fail you. That's why the return often comes late, after reflection, after quiet regret, after emotional clarity. By the time they realize what you truly meant, they also realize they weren't emotionally equipped to hold you. They see the damage their patterns caused. They see the confusion their silence created. They see the softness you offered and the fear they unconsciously projected onto it. And in that clarity, they face a choice: step toward growth or shrink further into old patterns. Either choice reveals something important. You were never the replaceable one. You were the awakening one. You changed them in ways they'll never admit. You challenged the script they lived by. You disrupted the emotional armor they built. You mirrored a version of love that didn't feel dangerous, and that terrified them more than danger ever did. Because danger was familiar, safety was not. You were the exception to their emotional rules. And that's exactly why they couldn't forget you, no matter who came after. Avoidants don't crave the person, they crave the feeling the person created inside them. And the feeling you created was one of a kind: softness without pressure, presence without demands, connection without chaos. That combination lingers, lives, echoes. So if you're standing here thinking you were replaced, let the truth settle. You weren't replaced. You were escaped. And escape is not the same as detachment. Escape is the reaction of someone who felt more than they could handle. Avoidants don't run from emptiness. They run from intensity. They run from closeness. They run from the mirror that reflects back the parts of themselves they're afraid to meet. You were that mirror. That's why they left. And that's why they remember. But here's the part that brings this full circle. Even if they miss you, even if they regret, even if they feel every ounce of what they lost, your story doesn't end with their return or their realization. Your story continues in the way you rise, beyond their silence, in the way you reclaim your worth, without needing them to validate it, in the way you learn that being unforgettable is not a burden. It's proof that you loved authentically in a world full of emotional armor. And not everyone is ready for someone like you, but someone will be. So if you're here, watching this, feeling this, hearing yourself in every line, don't walk away thinking you were too much. You were the first person they ever felt safe enough to almost love fully. Almost. But someone else will not almost love you. They will meet you with the same depth you give, the same presence, the same clarity, without the fear, without the running, without the emotional disappearance. Your heart is not something people outgrow. It's something people grow into. And if you want more videos that pull you out of the story, you were never meant to shrink inside. If you want the kind of truth that helps you heal, rise, and reclaim yourself, stay here with me. Like the video, subscribe, save this, share it with the version of you who needed it months ago. Because this journey isn't just about who left, it's about who you become after they do.